As Homeland Security agent Don Guthrie started investigating the disappearance of Jimmy Trindade, he got an earful from the missing man's brother, Patrick. Jimmy's family had grown increasingly frustrated with Jimmy's best friend, Roger Gamblin. While Roger seemed to be doing everything he could to find out what happened to Jimmy, Patrick felt he should be looking closer to home for answers.
We were at odds at this point because of the bizarre behavior and the lack of truthful answers from the last two people to see my brother, Chris Gamblin and Brian Prats.
Patrick's suspicions started the night Jimmy disappeared. The Coast Guard had just called with the news that they found the boat, but Jimmy was not on it.
Brian and Chris were laying on the couch. And I saw Chris's head, and he looked up, and when he saw me, he put his head back down like he was sleeping.
Faking it.
Yes. But at this point, I couldn't deal with Chris. I needed to continue to make sense of what was happening at that moment.
Whatever happened to Jimmy Trindade on this boat, one thing is for certain. Neither Jimmy's family nor many of his friends nor federal investigators believe that Chris and Brian were sharing everything they knew about what had happened. Their stories seemed to shift with every telling, and the only one who seemed to believe them was Chris's father, Roger, the man in charge of the massive search for his best friend, Jimmy. The rift between the Gamblin and Trindade families would turn into a barrage of accusations of betrayal. Two families, once so close, were now split along bloodlines. Chris's attorney, Richard Lubin.
It was very painful for Roger that this man who he had been so close to like a brother, and now his family was suggesting that Roger's family had something to do with his death, and he didn't like that.
Roger became so defensive about the allegations from Jimmy's family, he came up with his own theories. One, surprisingly, was that Jimmy was not dead at all. He floated the story to a local newspaper that Jimmy may have engineered his own disappearance.
Is there any chance that your father would have tried to engineer his own disappearance?
No. He loved my mother so much and loved me so much, and he would never leave us for any reason.
And then Roger attacked Jimmy's wife, Candace, telling a reporter that perhaps she was involved.
Roger was floating stories, saying something like, well, his wife was the only one who would benefit from him missing.
Roger had theory after theory after theory, and most of them very bizarre. And I believe the reason for that would be to continue to steer people away from what I believe to be true, that Brian and Chris know more than they've told us.
Agent Guthrie dismissed Roger's latest theories and instead went back to carefully check out Chris and Brian's stories.
Is it fair to say that Chris Gamblin's story didn't hold up?
That's fair to say.
For example, the story of how Chris and Brian were separated from Jimmy. All along, Chris had said that when one of the boats broke down, he radioed Jimmy, who said he would wait for them a few miles ahead. But Jimmy's friends and family told Guthrie that as the most experienced boater, and with his best friend's son involved, Jimmy would never leave them behind.
Did Jimmy Trindade strike you as the kind of skipper who would leave younger boaters behind with a mechanical problem?
He was very loyal to Roger, and he would not have allowed those boys to get out of his sight.
Remember, the two told investigators that Brian's boat, the smallest one, had mechanical problems. The reason they gave was that an oil reservoir flipped over and stalled Brian's boat. But Guthrie says just before the trip to the Bahamas, Roger had that problem repaired.
He had replaced the oil reservoir and put a new strap on that canister. The way it was situated in the boat between two batteries, it would make the flipping over very unlikely.
Guthrie's suspicions grew even more when Chris and Brian's story changed about their last radio contact with Jimmy. Chris said he thought he heard Jimmy calling for help.
He stated that he heard over the radio Jimmy calling U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, and they never made contact with him again.
Is there any evidence to support Chris Gamblin's claim that he heard Jimmy Trindade call the Coast Guard on his VHF radio for help?
No, we interviewed individuals that were in the area. We spoke to a Florida Marine Patrol officer that was monitoring the radio traffic. And
he didn't hear anything.
He did not hear anything.
The Coast Guard never heard anything.
The Coast Guard didn't hear anything from Jimmy.
What's more, if Chris and Brian heard Jimmy calling the Coast Guard, why didn't they mention it to the first law enforcement officer they met at the dock that night, Paul Alber?
It was definitely a detail that they left out when they spoke with me. If I was traveling with a friend and I heard him calling for the Coast Guard, I would be pretty concerned about that.
So the odds are
Probably didn't happen. Right.
Guthrie also learned that early on in their investigation, FBI agents had asked Chris and Brian to take lie detector tests. The FBI would not share those test results with Dateline, but one of Roger's private investigators, Ross Gaffney, did.
We were told that there were signs of deception and that while they may not have actually participated in his disappearance, that they knew something about his disappearance.
And one other thing Guthrie took a closer look at. Just 5 months before Jimmy was lost at sea, Chris Gamblin was arrested for cocaine and marijuana possession. In a plea agreement, Chris served 8 days in jail, but his record would show he was never formally convicted of a crime. Agent Guthrie now had his theory as to why Jimmy's boat was sabotaged and who was involved in the drug smuggling. He believed Jimmy had tried to stop the drug deal that day because his best friend's son, Chris Gamblin, and his friend Brian Pratt were somehow involved.
They posed the theory that somehow Mr. Trindade had come upon the boys involved in a drug deal and he was killed in their presence. It's a theory, but there's no evidence to support it.
Chris Gamblin and Brian Pratt denied that they were involved in any kind of drug deal at sea, nor witnessed Jimmy Trindade's murder. Brian's attorney, Greg Lehrman.
Brian was consistent that he knew nothing about how Jimmy had disappeared or that he had not been involved in Jimmy's disappearance and certainly hadn't seen Jimmy murdered.
Chris's attorney says the young man would never do anything to put his father's best friend in jeopardy.
If you're going to do a drug deal, why would you do it with him anywhere around? The whole thing is crazy. It's just crazy.
Attorney Lubin said even after Chris was being treated as a suspect, he still voluntarily submitted to a polygraph and DNA testing. Roger even hired his own polygraph examiner, and those test results obtained by Dateline showed no deception. Chris Gamblin and Brian Pratt have not been charged with any crime. On the 2-year anniversary of Jimmy's disappearance, Chris showed up for a Jimmy T Memorial Golf Tournament, toasting Jimmy with his favorite drink, Mount Gay rum.
And this is to Jimmy T. Jimmy T. Cheers.
Cheers.
Palm Beach Post editor Jan Tuckwood.
Anytime you get a guy lost at sea, people are turning against each other, lifelong friends, is going to be a mystery that would last a long time. How strange it would get, we did not know.